Today, we become legends.
So as you may or may not know by now, in Season 8, Clash and Siege are going to be merged into one game mode called Slash. We know very little about it so far other than the fact that it is happening. It will incorporate elements from both game modes and it will be 5v5. In this video, I'm going to give my thoughts on what I think the game mode needs to be successful and what parts of each mode should be preserved or scrapped. Since we know so little, we can speculate to the fullest extent possible about what might be in the new game mode. So first off, I'll talk about some things I want preserved from the originals before I go into talking about stuff that will be additional on top of that. Siege is my favourite non-conquest game mode, followed by Clash, so there are definitely things in these designs that I do really like. In terms of visual design, it's already been confirmed that we are getting one Mayan themed base and one Egyptian themed base to represent both Siege and Clash respectively. Whether or not the rest of the map will be designed in a completely different theme and it's just the bases that are Egyptian and Mayan, or whether the bases will kind of merge like they do in Conquest, we're not sure yet. So the first thing that I think pretty much has to be in the new game mode is the defining feature of Siege, the Juggernauts. For those that don't play Siege, you can earn points towards a Siege Juggernaut by clearing jungle camps, killing waves and getting god kills. At 100 points, a Juggernaut spawns in one of two lanes at random. You can also get a Juggernaut by defeating the Wild Juggernaut in the centre of the map, which is separate from your 100 points, so if you time it correctly, you can get two Juggernauts at once. This system is really what defines Siege in my opinion, and if they're going to call this new game mode a merger of Siege and Clash, they need to keep Juggernauts around in some aspect. I'm all for some slight reworking and updating of the system, given Siege is quite an old game mode at this point, which hasn't had significant gameplay changes in years, but the core idea of spawning Siege Juggernauts and additional stuff to help you push lanes is really interesting to me, and I would much rather see them bring this mechanic back for Slash instead of Apophis. I wouldn't think the map will be big enough for two major bosses, although they could relegate Siege Juggernauts to the point system only and remove the Wild Juggernaut in place of Apophis or some similar boss. I would also love to see them expand on the idea of different types of Juggernauts, similar to Conquest's Fury system. Every spawn of a Juggernaut could be a different variety, like a ranged variant, a tanky melee variant, maybe even a magical variant with AoE attacks that deal magical damage instead of physical. I think given Siege was introduced so long ago, there's tons of unexplored design space in the mechanics of this mode, and this is one that I think is pretty much essential to bring back in Slash to make it truly feel like a Siege hybrid. Another thing I want to bring back from Siege is some kind of significant jungle. Clash ends up feeling a little too like Arena with lanes for my taste, and I would like to see a jungle area of similar size to Siege, preferably with more to do in the jungle, like some extra harpy camps and maybe even a few unique camps you can only find in Slash. I would even be open to the idea of a dedicated jungler since the mode is confirmed to be 5v5 and I can only assume it will be two lanes given both its parent maps are two lanes. But I find the concept of a dedicated jungler pretty unlikely for a mode aimed at casual players. Something I would really like to bring back from Clash, however, is a large open fight area in the middle. Siege can sometimes feel a bit isolated where you just win your own lane and hope your teammates win the other lane. I like the aspect of Clash that allows you to move very quickly between the areas of the map and fight around a large open area in the middle. This of course could be the location for the Wild Juggernaut, the Apophis, or any other boss they plan on adding to the mode. Also, I'm going completely off script here, but I just had this idea as I was recording. What they could do with the Siege Juggernaut is instead of having it be like the big boss in the middle, they could have the Apophis be the big boss. But then for earning Siege Juggernauts, you could maybe have multiple small camps placed around a jungle area where there's sort of little mini Juggernauts and you kill those and maybe after you kill 3 or 5 of those, you spawn a Juggernaut. I don't know, just something I thought about completely off script. Maybe it's a terrible idea, but let's get back on topic. So they could even play with some of the new Conquest mechanics with the temporary unbreakable walls and perhaps make the early game more individual focused like Siege, but then midway through it becomes more similar to Clash when the walls come down and huge teamfights start happening. Because despite the fact that I think Siege takes the isolation too far, drafting two duo lanes that can work well with each other and playing that out against the enemy's two duo lanes in the early game is one of the fun parts of Siege for me. I would also like small side jungles to return, similar to what we have in Clash currently. I don't mean full-size jungle areas like there was in the beta Conquest map, but something like 1 or 2 camps at the most on each side of the lane in Slash. Since Siege really has no actual jungle and all 4 camps are cleared at the start of the match, combined with the fact that the lanes are very isolated so rotations don't really make a lot of sense in the early game, it makes for a lot of just staring at each other in lane after clearing waves with nothing else to fight over in Siege. Some small side camps could remedy this along with some other jungle camps in the main jungle as I mentioned earlier. With the map being 5v5, which is confirmed by the way, we're either going to see a dedicated jungler with 2 duo lanes, or a mix and match style system where everyone roams between both lanes like we have in Clash. A dedicated jungler on the Siege map clearly didn't work since the mode used to be 5v5 when it launched and was made 4v4 because it's a lot more fun that way, so really there are 2 options. Jungler or mix and match. Of these, I highly doubt we're going to see a dedicated jungler in Slash. As I mentioned before, I don't think it's really that good for a casual game mode. And before you say Clash and Siege were meant to be hybrid modes that teach you how to play Conquest, that's just not true anymore. Perhaps at one point they were designed with that in mind, but even the devs themselves have said they just want to make a fun, distinct game mode, not a tutorial map for Conquest. So I think in all likelihood we're going to see a map much more akin to the current Clash design than the current Siege design, with players roaming between lanes frequently. The only other option with 5 players and 2 lanes is to have 1 triple lane and 1 duo lane. This could be somewhat interesting if they made the map lopsided with a physically larger lane on one side with some extra jungle camps to compensate for splitting farm among 3 players, and a smaller lane on the other side with 2 players and a bit less jungle farm to keep things even. Otherwise the duo lane would get way ahead of the triple lane very easily and that would feel super unfair. I think this design could be very interesting and unique among Smite's modes, with the triple lane drafting a comp similar to a typical Joust team with a tank, magical DPS and physical DPS, and the duo lane drafting something similar to a Conquest duo lane or perhaps some kind of warrior/assassin and mage comp. But to be clear, I think this option is the least likely to actually be a thing. To date, all of Smite's maps have been vertically symmetrical in terms of basic geography, and I don't see that changing. Yes, camps and bosses are different in Conquest like the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant, but the general geography of the map is still symmetrical in the vertical axis. For this triple lane plus duo lane system to work, you would need one side to be physically larger and with extra farm than the other side. It's not impossible though, the devs did say they want to make this mode feel unique and like its own thing with no comparisons to Conquest, Joust, Arena, etc. So I won't completely rule out the possibility of a triple lane plus duo lane system. In fact, this is probably the best way to go about it in my opinion that would make the mode the most fun and unique. I just think that it's realistically unlikely to happen. I would imagine this map playing something like 1 lane from Siege and 1 lane that is similar to the current Joust, with connecting areas in between where you fight as a full team like you do in Clash. It would make for some very interesting team design choices, as you have to draft an effective triple lane in isolation, an effective duo lane in isolation, and an effective 5v5 team comp when you merge those 2 lanes for teamfights. But perhaps this is just my complexity-loving brain going a bit too ham and trying to turn Slash into a second Conquest. Let me know down below what you guys think of my ideas here, and if you prefer Slash to be 5v5 with a jungle, 5v5 with roaming, or 3v3 and 2v2. I'd love to hear the community's thoughts on this one. But that's it from me in this video. Just some general ideas on what I specifically would like to see from Slash when it does get released later in this season. In terms of release date, I highly expect Slash to be released in the mid-season patch. It's such a large addition that I can only see it being done in a huge patch, the next of which will be mid-season. But yeah, I'm out. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.